First step in the process is to determine a suitable location. In this case, it's in a sunny area, away from other plants, in the middle of the lawn. Now this could easily well be in a bed, but for this particular example we're going to put it in the lawn. So once we've marked the location, and the location is quite important, you have to accommodate for drainage. That is to say, if there's water running by it, you have to make sure that it's well clear of it. You want to make sure that the plant is getting adequate sun or shade depending upon the type of plant that it is. This particular Japanese maple requires sunlight, so it's in the bright sun. Once we have the location fixed, then the next step is to mark and dig our hole. Now we mark the hole by making it roughly twice the size of what the container is. We're going to strip off the sod that is now where the tree is to go. Alright, we have our circle cut and the sod is stripped off. Now we're ready to dig. Now generally speaking, beneath the grass you're going to find some decent soil. This is the topsoil. It's sort of a darkish color, and that we're going to retain. We're going to put that onto this tray right here. Now below that layer of topsoil you will find there's usually lots of other stuff. Sometimes it's heavy clay, which is very clumpy. In this particular case it's sand, and you can see there's a difference in color there that's quite obvious. The fact that that's obvious is not always readily apparent to those that are new to digging, but in this case this is sand for where we are planting this plant in downtown Kitchener. And this sand would be a bit of a problem because root systems do not generally root into sand. So if we have to dig the hole much deeper, this sand material would be taken away and disposed of. Now the good news is that most of this hole is topsoil around it, so the actual amount of sand we're going to have to remove is very, very small. The planting depth for this hole is quite critical because a lot of plants are quite sensitive to the height at which they are planted. And the rule of thumb is that it's always better to be a wee bit higher than it is to be low or even. In this particular instance, because we're on sand, it's not a mistake if we were even, but we're going to at some point in the future make a bed around this. So what we're going to do in the interim is we're going to have the bed or the plant itself sit a couple inches higher than the lawn, which is really the norm. In order to establish how high that should be, we put a board across the hole, and that board, being roughly 1.5 to 2 inches thick, will give us some indication as to where the top of that root ball should actually be. And that way we can assess how deep the hole has to be. Now if we go to the plant itself, we're going to take it out of this pot, and we do that by just shaking it off, and you'll see the root system is very nice and healthy. It's white. And we put that in our hole now to see how deep we are. And then we can see now we decided to dig a hole deep enough to go to China, it would appear, or to Japan, where this Japanese maple is from. But so in fact we're going to have to build the soil up in the hole in order to bring this root ball up such that the top of the root ball is roughly even with the top of the wood. So in order to do that, we're going to use a good planting loam mix. Now the good news is we have so much topsoil from our hole, we won't have to buy or supply all that much. Now not everybody's going to be so fortunate to have this much topsoil come out of a hole. And for those who don't, what we do is we supply there is a bagged soil that we would use. This is a 3-in-1 mix, Parkwood triple blend, and we're going to actually use some of that soil mix it with some of this soil to put into the hole to support the tree. So now we've dumped some of the good soil and that come out of the bag and some of our soil into the hole. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take all this and we're going to mix it all up so that it's well mixed together. Now it so happens that I have a little bone meal, so I've added a bit of bone meal to my cake batter, as it were, that we're going to continue to mix in. Now it's not essential to put bone meal in, but if you have it, by all means do so. Now we have it sort of loose and fluffy right now, and of course we can't just use it like that. What we're going to do is we're going to step it down. So we're going to go in here and we're going to make like a guy making wine with grapes. And we're going to firm it down a little bit. Now you're not jumping on it, all you're doing is trying to compress it just a wee tad. When we add our final solution to the hole, it will settle some more, but right now we want to have it a little bit firm so that we have some of the air, but not all of it, taken out of the hole. So now let's put our tree in, and we'll see how we are for depth now. Get our stick. Oh, we're closer. But we still have to come up with just a wee tad more. Okay, now we have our hole partially filled in with a little bit of compacted soil, good soil, and we can see now that the root ball is roughly the same size or the same height as our stick that is coming across, which means that in fact the root ball now is the same distance higher than the lawn. Now, if this was on a slope, which it's not, you know, it's quite imperative that the root ball be slightly even or higher than the highest side of the slope rather than the lowest side. That way that root ball is definitely sitting higher than the grade. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our tree in the correct position. We're going to backfill it and compact the soil around it. And we do that very simply. What we're going to do is we're going to pack it down. And this is a relatively straight process. We just take our heel and very gently at the edge of the root ball, we go in and just with our heel push down into the soil to firm that soil down. Now we don't have to jump on it. And of course a fellow who's heavier obviously makes a bit more of an impression than someone who's a little bit lighter. But all we're doing now is we're going to firm the tree in the hole. And of course we want to verify that we got it straight, which we do, which is a good thing because it's hard to straighten out after the fact. But that's all we have to do in order to firm that soil in there. We just do that around here maybe once or twice. It doesn't have to take very much. This root ball is now still visible. You can see it right here. There's the root ball. And the actual soil is going to cover that root ball by maybe an inch at the most. We don't want to have this thing buried too deep. In fact, having this part of the trunk buried deep with soil is a bad idea, because a lot of plants are very sensitive to the depth at which they're planted. So this is actually higher than the lawn, okay, and the soil is only going to be a little bit higher than what the root ball is. Okay, we have our soil, and there is the root ball down here, which I said before is only going to be about an inch or so buried, which it is, it's just a little bit. But the next and very most important thing is we have to make a saucer, or a soil saucer, and a soil saucer is just that. It's a ridge of soil. It's just like when you were playing in the sandbox as a kid. You're going to make a ridge of soil roughly at the edge of the root ball. So the root ball is in about here somewhere. You're going to make a ridge of soil such that when you water it, the water is going to fill this saucer up and then percolate down directly where the root ball is. And this is quite important because if you don't do this, the water may run all over the place and isn't necessarily going to go directly where the root ball is. And the root ball is critical. That's the part that needs the moisture, not all over the place, not around in the lawn and everywhere else, but directly where the plant sits. Okay, so we're going to make this saucer, and I'll show it to you as soon as I have it finished here. And there it is. The saucer is complete. Okay, the depth of the saucer is roughly, I don't know, 3 inches, 2.5, 3 inches. And of course, this saucer isn't going to stay forever. It's predominantly to be used during the first year of growth while you're trying to get the plant established. Now the question is, what about mulch? Well, in the case of mulch, the mulch could go over the entire surface. Okay, you may elect to keep it away from the center of the trunk simply because it might be a little bit too much buildup of moisture there, and sometimes you'll get certain plants that will rot if you do that. So usually you want to have just a wee bit of a circle of mulch away from the actual center of the trunk. And the last step in the process would be to stake it, and you'll see in this particular case there is a stake already attached because it's such a small plant. But there will be a more permanent stake that's put in there. The stake goes, generally speaking, on the northwest side of the tree, and that's of course to keep the prevailing wind from blowing the tree over. How it's adhered is a number of different ways, but suffice it to say that it only needs to be staked for about a year or so, just until the root system has rooted in and the plant is then, you know, established as growing straight. And the last step of the process after we've made our saucer is, of course, we're going to fill it with transplant solution. So now we've filled up our saucer with transplant fertilizer, and it's now going to water the root ball in thoroughly, and that's basically what you need to do when you have to rewater the plant. You fill up that saucer, you know that's in a couple inches of water, and for many plants that will hold for a few days. It really largely depends as to how much wind you get, the temperature, and what sort of soil condition. This being a sandy soil, of course, it dries out a little bit quicker, so it might require watering more often than someone who's on heavy clay. You'll see that the plant itself, the root ball, is definitely a couple inches higher than the lawn, which is what it's supposed to be. And we want to try and maintain the grass away from the actual edge of the tree for as long as possible. It definitely looks for a far more professional look in order to do that.